One of the problems here, you see, is that we keep relying on intelligence sources, intelligence officials, analysts, and it's becoming parasitic and osmotic. You know, first of all, the State Department hints, and Kerry says, and Obama says he doesn't know, and then all the newspapers start having huge articles. The Toronto Globe and Mail a couple of days ago had a huge center-page spread of all the kind of chemical weapons which can or are being used in Syria. But there isn't actually any evidence that any chemical weapon has actually been used. So we're fantasizing about this, but dangerous fantasies.
Robert, is Syria capable of responding to an Israeli attack, or do you think the Israeli government has calculated that they can bomb it pretty much at will?
I don't think it has any intention of responding. You know, the deputy Foreign Minister, Faisal Moqdad, whom I know, was on the radio yesterday saying all options are on the table. You know, Syria now using exactly the same wretched cliches as the Americans and the Israelis. And I think the answer is they're not in any position to shoot back at the Israelis. I could see that if they were losing the war against the rebels, which apparently at the moment they're not, that they might, as a sort of dark end to the conflict, trying to turn it into an international conflict with Israel. But I don't think they want to do so. The question you have to ask yourself, you see, is that they're using their MiGs MiG-29s against rebel forces and against, of course, civilian areas, of which they're killing quite a lot, with their Air Force. Yet this wonderful Air Force apparently can't defend Damascus from Israeli bombers. No, there doesn't appear to have been the slightest attempt by the Syrian Air Force to shoot down the Israelis who were firing the missiles into the research center, as the Syrians have admitted it was, and allegedly into this convoy of missiles. If they can't shoot down Israeli aircraft over Syrian sovereign territory, I don't think they're going to be starting to shoot back at Israel now.
And the move by the U.S. Senator in the New Jersey Democratic Senator Robert Menendez introducing a bill to allow U.S. to provide arms, military training supplies to Syrian rebel groups. The significance of this, Robert Fisk?
Well, we saw the significance when we supplied lots of training and weapons to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, one of whom was called Osama bin Laden. We've seen in many other wars, particularly in Central America, where America's support for brave freedom-fighting rebels, using one of the phrases of Ronald Reagan, turned them into various murderous militias. And there are plenty of murderous militias already in Syria, one of which belongs to the government, but others which appear to be in the opposition forces. I'm thinking of al-Nusra, which has accepted its links, or links at least, with al-Qaeda. Are these people going to be given American weapon training? It's an odd situation because, you know, in Mali, we're supposedly rooting out the center of jihadism, as I think one of the French ministers said. And then we're told by William Hague, our current beloved foreign secretary in London, that the center of jihadism is in Syria. So we're doing rather odd things at the moment. We're trying to destroy and liquidate al-Qaeda in Mali, but trying to give arms training to them in northern Syria. It really is a world gone mad, but oddly enough, you have to be in Syria to realize how mad it is. There's an odd thing that when you actually are traveling around Syria, Latakia, Tartus, Damascus, and further north than Latakia, and you listen to the news coming out of Washington, it's like Americans are living in this kind of fantasy world that bears no relation to planet Earth, where I'm trying to report. And this is getting steadily worse. And I think one of the problems is, as I say, this parasitic osmotic relationship between journalists and power, our ever-growing ability, our wish to, to rely on these utterly bankrupt comments from various unnamed anonymous intelligence sources. And I'm just looking at a copy of the Toronto Globe and Mail, February 1st, 2013. It's a story about al-Qaeda in Algeria. And what is the sourcing? U.S. intelligence officials said, a senior U.S. intelligence official said, U.S. officials said, the intelligence officials said, Algerian officials say, national security sources considered, European security sources said, the U.S. officials said, the officials acknowledged. I won't bore you. I've got another even worse example here from the Boston Globe and Mail, November 2nd, 2012. But, you know, we might as well name our newspapers official say. This is the cancer at the bottom of modern journalism, that we do not challenge power anymore. Why are Americans tolerating these garbage stories with no real sourcing except for very dodgy characters indeed?
And Robert Fisk, what do you think finally should happen in Syria?
I don't think there's any happy solutions. I fear I know a settlement will be a kind of federal state that will bubble along in a state of sort of half civil war and half ceasefires, which is what happened in Lebanon for many years, although Lebanon's death toll after 15 years was only twice what Syria's is in perhaps only 2 years, or just over 2 years. We'd like to see a democracy, wouldn't we? But although the word democracy has a bad taste, a ring in it for many Arab Muslims for good reason, we'd like to see some kind of freedom and dignity, which is what Syrians originally asked for before the massive peaceful protests on the streets. They weren't completely peaceful, but they were pretty peaceful, turned into armed militia, government forces battles. But I don't see any sign it's coming. I have to say that I don't think Syria will turn into a caliphate. But I said to several friends of mine, you know, how long is this going to last? And they said at least another 2 or 3 years.
Robert Fisk, we thank you very much for being with us. Longtime Middle East correspondent of The Independent in London, just in Syria for 2 weeks, author of a number of books, including The Great War for Civilization, The Conquest of the Middle East. He is based in Lebanon, but speaking to us from Ireland. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. When we come back, we go south to Mississippi to find out about a man who's scheduled to die today. Stay with us. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Aaron Maté.
We turn now to the controversial case of an African-American prisoner set to be executed tonight in Mississippi.